What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Team Chat Podcast, a video game show where we talk about games, the ones we love, the ones we hate, and everything in between. I am one of your hosts, Jerrett Wilson, joined across the power of the internet by my good friend and co-host, Rachel Mogan.
Buongiorno. I'm your good friend. Wow.
Best friend. Sorry.
Best friend. That's even more embarrassing.
Why?
I was already embarrassed by good friend.
Just, it's true. We do this show every week. It's just a realization, that's
how awkward
must be recognized.
How awkward would it be if I were like, I need you to walk that statement back?
Just
it's not reciprocated. Consider you like a friendly acquaintance.
No, I saw the video.
4 years.
I saw the video you sent me for my 30th birthday. I think we have a higher level of friendship.
Dang it. I did say that you were a good friend. Bummer.
Gotcha in it.
Caught in a lie.
But yeah, you can hear us talk about video games here on Team Chat Podcast. New episodes come out Tuesdays, 9 a.m. Central Time on podcast services around the World Wide Web, such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and others. You can also watch a video version of each episode over on our YouTube channel, so check that out at youtube.com/teamchatpodcast. You can find us on social media, such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can join our Discord server, where we talk about video games and a lot of other fun topics when we're not here recording the show. And finally, if you'd like to help make the show bigger and better, you can head over to patreon.com/teamchatpodcast, where for as little as $1 a month, you can support the show. And in return, we'll give you cool perks like getting the episodes early before the general Tuesday release and access to a private channel on our Discord server, the Rogues Gallery. But if you can't do that, that's no big deal at all. We totally understand and appreciate your support and helping us make the show bigger and better in other ways, such as telling your friends, writing us reviews, just spreading the good word of Team Chat Podcast. That helps make the show bigger and better as well. And we greatly appreciate and love all of our listeners and patrons alike. Heart emojis. I love that this has become a new thing that we do now.
Yeah, the heart emoji. It's especially easier now, like with the webcams, because we're doing this distance still.
Yeah,
just
I know.
because you can look directly into it, and you don't have to like contort
it's
your
heartfelt.
body.
It's heartfelt.
In
the arms of the angels. There we go. But before we
subscribe to the Patreon now to support two starving podcasts.
For now, that's what I call music. 75 featuring covers of Sarah McLachlan's In the Arms of the Angels.
Oh, that would be excellent. What if it were a whole album of just covers of that song, but like in different musical styles?
That'd be
like
pretty
one
funny.
Is big band and one is new wave, and
somebody
one is,
would buy it.
Goth rock. Somebody would love that.
Done in the stylings of Within Temptation.
Yes. Our favorite band.
Favorite band is so good. Well, before we jump into our main topic of the day, we have to do a little bit of news and find out what's coming out soon in our Moment with Mogan.
Of course, there's always games coming out, whether we want them to or not. And
we're starting to get into the heavy hitters of the fall territory.
Yeah, we are. Nothing coming out this week is going to be that big, though. So I would consider this to be like a lighter week than some of the ones we've seen before.
Before it ramps up big time.
Coming out today, as of September 15th, we have eFootball PES 2021. That's for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. We've also got Spelunky 2 is making its way to PlayStation 4 on September 15th as well. On the 17th, we have Medieval Dynasty for PC. On the 18th, Crysis Remastered, and Crysis is spelled with a Crysis. So I hope that on the cover it's someone like very dramatically crying, and it's like Crysis Remastered.
Oh, Crysis! that totally blanked when you said it the first time. Okay, I know which game that is. That's like
I have no idea what that is.
I've never played it. It's one that's held my interest. That I've been interested in before, just never got around to playing the series. But apparently, it was like even though they're fairly old games, even at the not fairly old, like maybe 10 plus years old.
Oh, okay.
Since the first Crysis was released. Even then, they were applauded for their great graphics and everything like that, and then being kind of like requiring a powerhouse machine to run, kind of. So it's kind of fun to see those coming back to the main consoles, or the current consoles, I should say.
Yeah, because those are the Crysis Remastered is coming out for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. Also on the 18th, we have Super Mario 3D All-Stars for the Switch. So this is the one that is the like bundled title of games. It's got Mario 64, Mario Galaxy, and Mario Sunshine.
Nice.
So there is still a little bit of the like, well, why are they charging full price for all of these old games? But, it is what it is. If you really want to play them, now you have the ability to play them on the Switch. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, I got my pre-order in. Gonna go pick it up Friday morning.
Gonna have a fun time.
Because I got the physical version, so that way Sam and I could like put them both on our Switches. Because you can't like we'd have to. Well, I guess I don't know. Anyway, I got the physical version because I thought that'd be more fun for this one anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the 18th as well, so it was along the same vein as Super Mario 3D All Stars, really exactly as good. Same quality. We have WWE 2K Battlegrounds.
Ooh, can't wait.
PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. On the 20th, we have Hello Neighbor. What a pleasant sounding game, but it's coming for Stadia, so whatever.
Stadia subscribers get that game.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
And then on the
Get
22nd,
excited.
Get excited, Stadia people, however few of you there are left. And then on the 22nd, rounding out the next of this week, that didn't make any sense, whatever, we have 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim. No idea what that is, but sounds cool, and that's for PS4.
Very cool, very cool. So also last week on September 10th, Ubisoft held their second Ubisoft Forward, where they gave us a little bit more information on, well, some new reveals actually, and not a whole lot on games that were already been released. I mean, they did talk about like Just Dance 2021. They gave more track update stuff. They did talk a little bit more about Watch Dogs Legions and said that, hey, Aiden Pierce, the character from Watch Dogs 1 will be playable or will be in Watch Dogs Legions. So that's kind of cool to see. Although, like, why not the character from Watch Dogs 2? Marcus, why not? Why does he not get into Legion? Maybe he does, and they're just saving him for a later reveal.
Dead. Yeah, maybe.
That's a good question because I haven't played 2, so maybe so. I don't know.
Might not be possible.
But they also gave. But before we get into the other things that they talked about, we gotta call Ubisoft out here because obviously, as you know, Ubisoft has been in a lot of hot water recently due to a lot of claims and of sexual harassment and everything coming from a lot of higher ups in the company, and just sexual and just harassment in general happening there that has led to a lot of internal investigations, a lot of people leaving. But in all of this, though, this is even before, like, started coming out before the first Ubisoft Forward they held back in June, I believe.
Yep.
And so been going on for a long time. And just now, before this Ubisoft Forward, Yves Guillemot, the CEO of Ubisoft, finally released a statement in a video because people were saying, like, why didn't you do this before the first one? And then,
for real.
So before the second one, he does finally release a statement, but separate video, separate post, separate from the event entirely. And where he apologizes and for all of it, and says he's deeply, deeply sorry for everyone who was hurt and all that. But still, though, come on, Ubisoft, you couldn't include it in the forward. You couldn't include it, in streams and stuff later.
It's due to time constraints. We couldn't include it due to time constraints. That apology wasn't an hour long. You absolutely could have included it. It's just cowardice.
And also, as you don't even have to be in production, like video production, for like me to know this is a pre-recorded thing. You can just re-render a new version that has the apology video tacked onto the front. So get over yourselves, Ubisoft. Like that's some bullshit right there.
It really is.
There's like what were your time constraints? The person who hit play on the live thing had to make sure they got to lunch by noon. Like, come on, no, just like play the video. Include the video in this messaging because that's a stronger message than having it be the separate thing. Like you're trying to be like, oh, cool, checkbox.
Yeah. I mean, releasing it this way just makes it very clear that they're trying to hide it. They're trying to hide their apology because they're trying to hide the entire ordeal.
Yeah.
They just want people to forget that it happened. And it's like, we haven't.
No.
People, it's an ongoing thing. Still waiting for some resolutions there. So thanks for the apology, but no thanks for it being such a clear attempt at sweeping things under the rug. It's just cowardice is what it is.
Yep. So that's kind of shitty. So do better, Ubisoft.
Do better.
Because that's not acceptable and how to handle and how to handle situations like this.
It is not.
But so the two big announcements outside of that from the Ubisoft Forward is that we did finally get God and Monsters. We got new information on that, which it's no longer Gods and Monsters. It's now Immortals Phoenix Rising, with Phoenix spelled Fenyx.
So real quick, overall, I am actually pretty excited about this game, but I do briefly want to drag the game for having like such a dumb edgelord spelling of the word Phoenix. I was like, really? Fenyx?
It was kind of silly.
totally seems like something a 14-year-old would do on like a community forum. They would like have their username be Dark Phoenix, but the Phoenix would
But
be
there's no X's, like three X's with two capitalized one, and then like 420 or 69. So it's not quite that level, but still, I get where you're going.
I'm going to go on ahead and call the name on PS5 Dark Phoenix 42069, so nobody take my name. That's my new name.
Go ahead and just put in the fill out the form to fill that out, to change that now.
I'll write to Sony like, hey, if you guys could please reserve my name for me, that'd be great.
But no, that game actually does look a lot of fun. I still wish it had kept the name Gods and Monsters, just because that's kind of cool. It seems a little cooler sounding than Immortals Phoenix Rising, but still looks like it's going to be a very fun romp through ancient Greece and dealing with Greek mythology. You're basically going to be fighting Titan. You've been brought by the gods to defeat a Titan. And so you're throughout this whole journey beyond through these different realms, fighting big monsters. And it looks like you're going to be able to unlock a lot of different skills and everything for you. The cool thing is it's not like a hyper realistic art style, which I appreciate for this. Like, especially because Ubisoft had just been giving us like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which was in ancient Greece. So if you turn around and gave us another game, hyper realistic, the confusion is bound to be there. So it's really cool. It would
just be boring. It would just be done.
It'd be like, we just got this game. Why are you giving this to us again? So this is really cool. Like it definitely has feels kind of Breath of the Wild-esque, both in art style and just like look and how the combat plays and everything. But I'm pretty interested to get into that one and learn a little bit more about it.
Me too. This is actually one of the few Ubisoft games where I'm like, yeah, okay, I'd give that a shot. I'm not like exceptionally excited about it, but I would definitely like to give it a try. Mm-hmm. This is a game that I would give a fair shot. I do see the similarities to Breath of the Wild, but I think I mentioned this on our Discord. It does seem to have a much more complex and engaging combat system, which I think is a great distinguishing point. I think that's a good move.
And it also has fully customizable character. Like you can change your character to like be anything. Like you can even give like even go like a more god look, or like I saw with like green glowing eyes and all this other stuff. Tons of customization options for you to choose from. So that's pretty cool.
The natural distinguisher among character creations, as you well know. How old can I make my old lady character that I'm inevitably going to craft?
There you go.
And if she doesn't have the deepest craggy wrinkles I've ever seen, I'll sue Ubisoft for discrimination against old women.
Oh, man, you just add it to the list.
Yeah, just add it. Just toss my hat in and be like, I'm adding to the civil lawsuit.
The other big announcement that a lot of people were looking forward to, though, from the Ubisoft Forward was also that the Prince of Persia: Sands of Time remake has been officially announced. Although it was when I wasn't able to watch the Forward live, and so as like I saw the big announcements coming through, I was like sharing them to our Discord, and even though I had to go watch them later, and so I saw the Prince of Persia trailer, so I posted it, and then our good buddy Brandon responded and was basically like, this kind of looks like a PS3 game. What's up with this? And I was like, oh, really? Interesting. And when I finally watched it, I was like, they are using the term remake loosely. Because like, let's just call it remaster and move on. Because that, like, it does not look the greatest in terms of graphical fidelity.
So as far as, I'm not a gigantic Prince of Persia stan, but I absolutely understand why people love this game, and I think it was well overdue for a remake or a remaster. Certainly between when it came out and now. I mean, that game is old at this point. So that does also mean that they have a lot more ground to cover in terms of like upgrading it graphically. So I kind of understand why it doesn't necessarily look better, but my questions are, how long have they been working on it? And is there anything about the game that's been changed other than just the graphic upgrade? Because if not, then it's like, okay, I'm cool with that, because you always have to be a little worried about Ubisoft, because you never know what they're gonna do to like F a game up in terms of the not super customer friendly approaches they often take. So the fact that it doesn't look better just kind of makes me think, oh, they probably didn't touch it that much. Okay.
That's true.
It's like, that kind of makes me feel better, but also I understand that, this is a really popular game from ye olden days. It probably could have been done a little better.
Well, like, I feel like I feel like if you're gonna, if I have missed out on the original Prince of Persia games too, and was looking forward to this one as being like the introduction into that series, because hopefully this would be the signal that like, hey, we're revamping interest in this to then bring out new entries later on. But when you're saying you throw in the word around remake, and especially of an older game, like Final Fantasy VII did a remake, and it looks totally new, totally different. Prince of Persia, if you're calling it, but whereas even say Spyro, and Crash Bandicoot old trilogies being brought back. Those were remastered and brought to like current graphical standards. This one, just from the trailer alone, which trailers are supposed to be especially, and like often derided for being too overly perfect in what they're going to deliver. This one didn't really hold up to what I would have accepted if they called it remaster. I'd be like, cool, they're upgrading it, making it look a little nicer. Like, I mean, kind of like what they're doing with what Nintendo's doing with Super Mario 64. It's not being totally redone to match today's standards of graphics, but they're cleaning it. They're cleaning it a little bit. You know what I mean? And so it was kind of interesting to me that they're like, no, it's a remake. And I'm like, but this looks like a 360 PS3 game.
So my conspiracy then about this is maybe that's exactly the point. Maybe they had the trailer intentionally not be that good, and then the actual game's going to come out and it's going to be way better.
It's like reverse psychology.
They're intentionally setting the bar really low, and they're like, oh, just you wait. You're going to be blown away by comparison. It would be an interesting strat. It would be an interesting strategy.
Yeah, because then their word of mouth marketing is really going to have to take off, because everybody's going to be like, I saw the trailer, wasn't impressed. And like the 5 people who buy it are going to be like, no, it's really great. And then it blows up.
They're just going to take the world by storm. Prince of Persia 2021, best ever. I think it is
Game
coming out it is coming out in 2021. Did I read that correctly?
I believe so. I could be wrong. I can double check real quick, but I think that it is going to be coming out. But Immortals Phoenix Rising is in December. It's like December 3rd, I believe.
Yes, I think you're right. I want to say January 21st. I think Prince of Persia is Jan 21.
That sounds correct. That sounds right.
Pretty sure.
But yeah, so like I said, they announced some other news at this as well for some other games. Those are the 2 big announcements that we had from the Ubisoft Forward that we wanted to focus on, because we didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on that, because we're continuing our mini-series, if you will, of the greatest of the last generation, or the PS4, Xbox One, as those consoles are nearing their end. Oh, because that was the other big news. I knew there was something else that happened. I was traveling this last week, so my news was kind of off. But the Xbox Series S and Xbox Series X pricing and release dates were officially confirmed, whereas the Xbox Series S is a smaller console. It's going to be rolling out at $299, and the Xbox Series X will be rolling out for $499. So, and then this is Tuesday when you're listening to this. Tomorrow, then is going to be Sony announced another broadcast from them, where I'm assuming, dear God, at this point, if it's not the price, like what the hell are you doing? But there hopefully should be get pricing information for the PS5 as well. But so pre-orders for the Xbox consoles will be starting soon, so you can find all that stuff out on their website. But yeah, so the new generation is almost here, and because of that, we are celebrating some of our favorite things from the previous generation, from this ending generation. And last week we did favorite hidden gems from the previous generation. This week, we're going to do our favorite characters from the PS4 and the Xbox One, which I got to say, before we got started recording, I was telling Mogan, I had a hard time whittling this list down to 3.
I had the opposite problem. I approached this from such an exclusionary standpoint that I was like, who's worthy? Who's worthy to be on the list? And, you could always argue like, wow, those are the 3 you picked. I don't really get that, but whatever.
I mean, it's our opinion. If there are favorite characters.
I am betting you at least $10 that you and I share a game in common, or even share a character in common. And I think we might be able to like piggyback it together, because I can guess what one of yours is, and mine is the companion piece.
Oh, I don't know actually.
Ooh, maybe not then.
I think the one that I think where does yours fall on the list? I was gonna say I can go ahead and start, but if you're teasing this pretty good, so I feel like if
mine was gonna be like number 1.
Okay, then we'll wait. But I can go ahead and kick this off then. But no, I don't. I really don't think we're gonna actually cross over that much. I think the character that we're thinking of they're in my honorable mentions, but I don't think they're not going to quite make it into the top 3. I think,
interesting.
like I said, I was like thinking of this. I have like my number 1 and 2 were super easy. The number 3 slot is where I really had to fight for it. And so what I eventually settled down on this one though, because I tossed around a ton of different characters in here, but where I eventually settled, number 3 for me is Dutch van der Linde from Red Dead Redemption 2.
Oh, okay. Starting with Red Dead 2.
We're starting with Red Dead 2.
It's best the console, and that's the console, so there's no other option.
But so Dutch van der Linde is he's portrayed by Benjamin Byron Davis, and so his character in Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2 and Red Dead Redemption is that he is the leader in 2 of the Dutch van der Linde gang. In Red Dead Redemption 1, he's the disgraced ex-leader of the Dutch van der Linde gang. But so why I liked him so much, and I was kind of wanting to have a villain in this top 3 anyway. And so and he's probably one of the, if in my opinion, one of the best villains of this last generation of games, because his character is so well done and so well acted by Benjamin Byron Davis. But what makes him so good is that he's always scheming, and he's always trying to like figure out the next play. But you know especially from Red Dead 1 that he's a scumbag. But in 2, what I thought was so well done is how you're leading this band of outlaws, yes, and you're a part of it as Arthur Morgan, but still, he seems like he's legitimately looking out for the best of the group, and he does view them as his family. And he's like, we got to do all this stuff. We got to run to this next place and hide out. We got to go do this next job because this is going to give us the money we need to be able to go to this place where we can really be safe and we can really be secure financially and in our freedom. But the thing is as the game goes on, you can tell that he's really not this benevolent person who is here to grace the big gang with all these bounties and riches that he's promising them. He's really just this dude who's looking out for number 1, and you're just the way to help him get what he wants for himself. Because especially as the game goes later on, he really crumbles as the power that he thought he had with this gang starts to fall around him, as Arthur, his second in command and like best friend, starts to doubt him and to say like, hey, Dutch, I don't think we're doing it right. And Dutch, no matter how many times Dutch can be like, well, I have a plan. It's like, no, your plan's failing and you're getting people killed, and we're killing a lot of people who don't need to be killed. And you're putting a lot more people who need to be in danger, who do not need to be in danger. You're putting a lot of them in danger, such as like when I talked about in our recent episode of Memorable Moments, when his dealings with those 2 families wind up getting John Marston's son kidnapped and then handed off to like a crime lord in Saint Denis. And so it's very interesting to see from the very beginning of the game, how he's posed as this incredibly strong, like I said, generous benefactor who is always looking out for his family. But really in reality, he's actually a coward who's looking out for himself, because at the end of the game, slight spoilers here for Red Dead Redemption 2, when it finally does get down into the nitty-gritty where you're facing off against Dutch, when shit really hits the fan, he abandons everyone. He takes his money, all the money he can get, and he runs. He's like, I put on this show long enough of acting like I care about you all. I don't. I just need this money so I can be safe and I can get away. And so it's just very interesting to see how he was able to hold everyone to him and close to him for so long, because that is where I think he's a great character. He is incredibly charming, and he has this incredibly eloquent way of speaking. And also, I just love his voice. It's this really gruff, deep voice, but also kind of raspy. It's interesting. I've always wondered when I was playing the Red Dead and Red Dead 2, I was always like, man, his voice is so cool. I wonder how closely that actually matches Benjamin Byron Davis's voice, or is this like something like a totally new voice he's pulling for the character? And I've since then started following Benjamin Davis on Instagram and everything, and he'll do this thing like a lot of actors and everything have been doing recently, like reading plays or sonnets and stuff like that. And no, that's just his, like, it's pretty close to his normal voice and everything. And that just something about it is even in Benjamin Byron Davis and watching his videos, I'm captivated by it. So of course, like that translates over into Dutch and makes what makes Dutch such a captivating and compelling character. And so seeing that though, him being this originally at the beginning of the game, this powerful figure that everyone's like, oh, Dutch is so great. Yeah, he missteps every once in a while, but who doesn't? He's just doing what he can for us. To near the end, he's just like, nope. Fuck everybody. Arthur, you've betrayed me. Get out of my gang. I'll kill you next time I see it. I'll kill anybody who's getting in my way. It kind of he becomes that trapped in a corner kind of character, and he's just like,
Yeah.
and he doesn't care. He doesn't care anymore at all. He doesn't care at all to try to put forward this brave face. He's just like, nope. I've always cared about number one all the time, and you suckers fell for it. I'm out. And so
You suckers fell for it.
yeah, exactly. And so I just think, especially as a villain, because and he's a villain. Like he murders people in cold blood all over the place. He doesn't mind putting countless other people at risk to get what he wants. But I just think between Benjamin Byron Davis's performance as Dutch and then just the writing of the character just came together so well to create such a compelling villain who you at times feel for. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, there are times in the game you're like, oh, man, this sucks for Dutch. Man, that's really hard. He's got a lot on his plate. But then you're just like, no, he's a piece of shit. And so I just think how well the game balances those two things, and his portrayal, I think, makes Dutch Van der Linde one of my favorite characters of the last generation of consoles.
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, I've never played any of the Red Dead games, so there's only so much emotional connection I have to these wild, wild West cowboys. But
Right.
you always do such a good job of bringing them to sparkling life.
Oh, well, thank you.
In some cases, the sparkling light of perhaps a burning mansion. That's how brightly they sparkle.
Shine bright like a diamond, as the song
Yeah,
says.
shine bright like a diamond. You know the song, famously authored by John Marston himself, Shine Bright Like a Diamond.
Yep, it's on the soundtrack and everything.
A
You can
man
listen to
before
it.
his time.
But no, yeah, I love Dutch
Oh,
Van der
boy.
Linde, and I think, and it was a hard one because I was kind of like, man, does a villain fit in my top characters? But I think they absolutely can, and so it was a hard choice
Dutch, I'm
because I
sorry,
think,
I always get John Marston and Dutch Van der Linde are like in my head the same.
oh no, that's fine.
Because they're all just grizzled dudes. In
Well,
the
I thought
Wild
you were
Wild
just implying.
West.
I mean, John Marston was in the gang, so I thought you were just saying that he wrote the song and like to be like, oh, this is my
Well, that
ode to
too.
Dutch, But no, it was a hard one. I think once we read through go through our full list, we can like say any of our honorable mentions because I had quite a few, and trying to decide which one hit this number 3, like I said, was really hard. So
Yeah,
we'll wait
who
and
were
get-
some of your honorables?
Oh, you want to go ahead and hear it? No, I don't want to do it yet
For
because then
at
that
least-
might.
Okay.
Okay, I don't want to do that yet. We'll do that
Oh,
after
it
I
might
leave my number
spoil
1 because it
mine.
might
Okay,
spoil some
gotcha.
other ones.
right.
But so, who was your number 3 favorite character?
So my number 3 is a controversial choice because
Ooh.
some people hate him, some people love him,
Mm.
and some people are very neutral about him. And he's also not a main character. So I actually wanted to talk about a part of this is because we kind of touched on this game in the last episode, and it was one of my honorable mentions, but didn't quite make the cut because it actually is really popular and well publicized.
Mhm.
It's the Outsider from the Dishonored series.
Oh,
Ooh,
yeah.
So this decision may have been informed by a couple of recent things. So first of all, I love the Dishonored series. It's one of my favorite games, but I didn't feel like choosing Corvo or even Emily Caldwin as, characters that I think made a big impact or that are just really interesting. I didn't really think that either of them applied because in both of their games, when you play as the protagonist and you have all of these different options to choose from, what you, the player, choose is clearly affecting the character that you're playing. So in those cases, I feel like it's maybe less a case of a really well-designed character and more a case of like, oh, well, you're designing the character. It's whoever you want them to be. And it's like, I still think that they're really well written because neither Corvo nor Emily are entirely silent protagonists. They do talk and interact with their surroundings. But I just didn't feel like I had a strong case for them,
Mhm.
Whereas the Outsider, this, you wouldn't even call him the deuteragonist. If anything, he's almost an antagonist. He's an integral part of the Dishonored games because he's the catalyst for everything that happens in a sense. So actually in more than a couple of senses really. So the Outsider is kind of a complicated character. You have or have not played Dishonored?
I have. I think I made it like halfway through, so I know who
Gotcha.
the character is and how he
So
intertwines with Corvo.
yeah, I will be talking about both Dishonored 1, 2, and a little bit about Death of the Outsider, the kind of side game that they did most recently. So there are going to be a lot of spoilers in here. So if you haven't played Dishonored and you're really invested in the Outsider, maybe tune out. But so the Outsider is basically this mystical kind of non-person, you're not really sure what he is, who comes from just this void. And he just sort of materializes from the void and comes to whomever he wishes to bestow upon them void-like evil powers. So the Outsider is the one who's out here in Dunwall, in the world of Dishonored, just granting random people these wild telepathic, telekinetic powers willy-nilly. And some people have compared him to kind of a trickster god because of his morally ambiguous ways. You know, he's not really doing it for good or for evil. He just seems to be doing it because he wants to, and maybe even because he's bored. You're not really sure. But so when he comes to any given person, it's just kind of like he rolls up on you and he's like, so, see you're having some troubles. Well, boyfriend, have I got good news for you? And then he like gives you a sales pitch and he's like, I've got this new product. It's called Evil Powers from the Void. Do you accept? And at least Dishonored 2, and I think in the first game, you would have to correct me on this if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure that you can choose to reject accepting the Outsider's mark, which is how he gives you his powers. So you can definitely do it in the second game. Maybe you can't do it in the first game, but you can always choose to not use the powers as much as you want to.
Aren't you? I know you can choose to use them, but aren't you at the beginning of the first one? Like, aren't you almost killed and he like brings you back to life?
Yeah. But that's him just bringing you back to life. That's not him bestowing his mark upon you.
Oh, okay. So I kind of thought that was like, I'm bringing you back to life, so you're going to use this.
Oh, okay. Maybe that is what happens.
So you might not get to choose the first one. I'm not totally sure either.
So good catch. In the first game, you can't do it. In the second game, you definitely can do it because he's like, "Do you accept?" And you can be like, "Yes or no," which canonically makes no sense because if you chose the character, maybe it's only if you pick Emily.
Did you play as Emily?
I picked Emily. So I assume that if you start the game as Corvo in Dishonored 2, maybe you already have the mark and you don't have the choice. But if you start as Emily, you do get to choose because the Outsider rolls up and he's like, so about your dad? I mean, technically these powers aren't hereditary, but y'all just keep getting into shenanigans and I'm really here for the tea. I love all this nonsense that's happening. So you want these powers too? And you can be like, yes or no. And it's definitely not how he talks for starters. I'm giving a very bad impression of him. So the Outsider is this adult man that kind of has a fairly childlike face. It may just be appearing to be a little bit childlike because he has these massive, totally black, voided out eyes. And he has very fair skin and kind of just short black hair. He very much looks like he shops at Hot Topic. He wears all black, of course, because he lives in the void. Who wouldn't? And he just sort of floats around whenever he visits you. He's very incorporeal. You always get the feeling that he's just sort of this intangible shadow person. And when you're talking to him, he's a big fan of villain-esque exposition. He loves to just kind of talk at you. He loves to go on and on. And in the first game, he is voiced by Billy Lush. In the second game, he was replaced with Robin Lord Taylor. I don't know why they chose to replace him with Robin Lord Taylor, but from what I could remember, both of the performances were really good. At the very least, I remember the Billy Lush version very well. Very well. Dishonored 2, I actually haven't finished. I'm still working on it, so I'll update you once I'm done with that one. And Billy Lush does an incredible job of giving the Outsider just this character of, again, almost childlike wonder in that he's just really curious to see what kind of mischief can he do. Mm-hmm. How can bestowing his otherworldly powers upon mere mortals, how can that affect things? And he will just periodically show up throughout the game to kind of keep tabs on you. And it does sort of weave together this interesting painting of like who his character is, because you can only assume that he does this same thing with everyone that he gives his powers to. And some of the other characters that you encounter in the games, primarily antagonists, so this is definitely an antagonist, the antagonist Dowd, who is really your like top mark, or one of the top marks that you're trying to get to in Dishonored 1, and this one I feel like is more of a deuteragonist, because you do eventually play as her in Death of the Outsider. Dowd's protege, Billy Lurk, she is also given powers by the Outsider. So you've got Corvo, you've got Emily Caldwin, you've got Dowd, and you've got Billy Lurk, all of whom are people of just wildly varying moral values themselves, that just kind of all have these powers. And it's interesting that they are all more or less, in most capacities, fighting each other. Like, Corvo is definitely trying to kill or at least neutralize Dowd. The same goes for Billy Lurk, actually. And you can even play as Dowd versus Billy Lurk in some of the DLC for the first game. You can technically kill her, which makes her appearance in Death of the Outsider very confusing. You're like, I don't think this is right. I'm pretty sure I killed you,
That
but
old
whatever.
canon doesn't count. We'll just sweep that under the rug.
Canon doesn't count. They needed her to be alive for the rest of the games. But it's just interesting because you think about, wow, what's motivating the Outsider here? What's his deal? Why is he out here doing this? And just really that mystery is a big part of why I like this character so much, because he's very dramatic, he's very theatrical. Whenever you get to his temples, because his temples are all over the world of Dishonored, they're all over Dunwall. And that does also bring to light the fact that normal people know about the Outsider. People that don't have his powers still know about him.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll find these like cryptic scrawlings on walls, like the language of madmen, that are like, the Outsider, his eyes, the black eyes of the void. And you're just like, I think they've known about the Outsider for a while. And there are these little talismans that you can find all over the place that people are clearly making in attempts to either, appease the void or appease the Outsider, or to gain his powers by extension. So he's very much an integral part of this Dunwall society, which I think is so interesting, because usually when you have games, it's like, oh, you get these magical powers from this mystical source. Other people typically don't know what the source is.
Yeah.
The NPCs usually aren't out there being like, wow, got those powers from the Outsider, did you? But in this game, they're like, we know what you did. We know where you got those powers from, you evil, evil person. So he's very much perceived as this evil being. And then when you meet him, he's kind of not. He's just kind of this weird guy who's just kind of out here to have a fun, cool time.
Yeah.
He just wants you to blow stuff up with your magical powers and watch the gore splatter the walls. And he's like, yeah, this is as fun for me as it is for you. We're all having a good time here. And whenever you get to his temples and collect one of his bigger talismans, runes, they're called runes in the game, and collect one of his larger runes, those are periods in the game where he'll like physically appear to you again, and he goes into his like villain exposition where he'll be like, I see that you've done XYZ thing. And what's fun about it is he'll comment on things that you've done in the game. So the decisions that you've made and kind of the path that you're going down, whether you're being really, really evil, very chaotic, or much more ordered and a little bit more aligned with good, air quotes, he'll make commentary about all of that. And he's like, okay, I see what you're doing here. I'm curious to see what you'll do next. So he kind of serves as a pseudo-narrator in a lot of cases to kind of keep you caught up with what you're doing yourself. He's great for catching you up if you've taken a break from the game and then you're coming back and you're like, oh, shit, I don't remember what I did here.
Last time on Dishonored 2.
Last time on Dishonored 2, the Outsider will show up and he'll be like, let me catch you up, girl. You've been killing a lot of people and I've been keeping tabs. So he's just this fascinating, mysterious character that, and here's where things get into big spoiler territory, I feel like was almost hurt by kind of his backstory. So as it turns out, in Death of the Outsider does actually have a fairly concrete and mortal origin. So again, this is big spoilers. So as it turns out, the void is truly where the Outsider manifests from. So the character of the Outsider is much less, the void and just a piece of it. He's just a manifestation of the void. The void itself was harnessed by, as it turns out, a cult.
Oh.
And some people kind of decried this as like, that's lame. I love cults. You know I love cults. I'm all about that cult life. So anytime a creepy cult shows up in a game, I'm like, yes, this is awesome. So it turns out a cult actually sacrificed some person. I don't remember his name. They sacrificed some mortal person to turn that person into the outsider. And the outsider, or whoever his mortal counterpart is, wasn't super pleased about that. So in Death of the Outsider, you get all this background on how this poor person was sacrificed with like a ceremonial knife. And he is technically still alive, sort of, because you can infiltrate this cult in Death of the Outsider, and you can find the outsider's mortal body, just kind of still encased in like this stone pod. He's just kind of chilling there.
Yeah.
And the cult is keeping him alive to make sure that the outsider sticks around because they want to also use these void powers.
Oh, interesting.
So it's just an interesting like tie together of like, well, you also have this moral choice of, are you going to kill the outsider's mortal body to get rid of him entirely? Or, and I thought this was just a super cool thing to kind of tie into the game, as it turns out, the mark of the outsider, that mysterious mark that you get on your hand, that's his human name.
Oh.
So if you restore his own mark to the outsider's mortal body, he basically regains his name and regains his mortality. He becomes human again.
Oh, interesting.
So basically you have the choice to kill the outsider, which is this void character, or restore the outsider's mortal name to his body, thereby saving him in a sense. So again, it's just this interesting two paths in a forest. Which do you choose to take?
Right.
And I just love how they kind of fleshed out the outsider, and I love the mystery about his personality. Like, it kind of brings to light, was he like this as a regular person?
Just a jokester.
Was he just always a trickster? Was he this dramatic as a human being? So I just love asking myself those questions, and for me it makes characters more fun. So that's why I think The Outsider is my number 3 pick.
Very nice. Very nice. I was not expecting that one, honestly, gotta say. So that was a good pick. Good pick. So my number 2 is Bayek of Siwa from Assassin's Creed Origins.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. I know that you really love this character, and he has a super badass wife, so I can be on board with this.
Oh, yeah. So Bayek was portrayed by Abu Bakr Salim. And so who Bayek is he's a Medjay in ancient Egypt, which, for one, I think another reason why this character is so cool is just because ancient Egypt is also another one that like is another one of those areas that hasn't been explored a ton in video games.
In gaming, not in real life.
In real life, it's been explored a lot. But still, for going and getting to walk around, and especially with the depth that they fleshed out the world in Assassin's Creed Origins, just made getting to go through ancient Egypt just such a treat. But so it was wonderful, though, to get to do it as Bayek, because I feel like Bayek was one of the more emotionally ranged characters to come from the Assassin's Creed series in a long time. Like, I would probably say he's my favorite character since Ezio from Assassin's Creed 2. And just because I feel like they gave him more of this internal struggle. Like, say, for example, like, I love Cassandra right now as I'm playing through Assassin's Creed Odyssey still. And while she is a fantastic character, because Odyssey lets you play around with your own choice a little bit more, I feel like her personality therefore kind of becomes that of the player a little bit.
Yeah.
Bayek was a little more his own person in the sense that they had this arc he needed to go on. At the very beginning of the game, spoilers for this game, is like his son Kimu is killed by this order that is the early branches of what would eventually become the Templar Order that the Assassins and the Templars are fighting against through ever. Exactly, bringing it back again. But so he's killed in this scuffle with them because Bayek finds that they're trying to get into this vault deep under the city of Siwa, whereas he is kind of the protectorate that the area that he protects, and so his son is killed there, and so that obviously very deeply wounds him in his person and gives him something that he's like, okay, well, I've got to figure out what the secrets of this order are because I have to avenge my son. And But also at the same time, there's this political conflict going on because this is during the Ptolemaic era. So this is when like Rome is really starting to heavily influence Egypt and Cleopatra. Like you meet Cleopatra later in the game. And so there's this political struggle of who do you support? Do we, are we supporting this like these Romans who are starting to come in and even Greek influences that are starting to come in, or do we stay true to Egypt and everything? And so it creates this whole struggle where Bayek has to weigh this allegiance to Egypt, but also this quest for revenge for his son. And while his wife, Aya, who you mentioned, incredibly badass character as well, and it was so fun to get to play as her later in the game, but she isn't, and that kind of forms this third conflict because while she is like, yeah, like it was terrible, like what happened to our son, and not trying to like say that didn't affect her deeply as well, but she is feeling this more stronger pull and tie towards making sure Egypt is set up correct, is handled and is set up with the correct leader. And so that kind of at times in the game puts them at odds with each other. And so it's this I just felt like all those conflicts created an incredibly dynamic character where Bayek is struggling with the principles that that makes him who he is. Like he swore his allegiance and life to protecting of Egypt. But then once he sees this new force coming in who seems to undermine both his family and his country, he feels like this is where I need to be focused on. And this is the greater good. And this will solve for the greater good. Getting rid of this secretive order that he can now see is playing its hands not only in Egyptian politics but also in Roman and Greek politics as well. And so he like sees this as this root issue that this is where I need to be focused. This is what determines my focus. Like Aya comes up and is like, hey, yeah, I get that, but also like we got to make sure our girl Cleopatra gets on the throne because she's going to be the best for Egypt. And he's like, I'm not too sure about that. And so just seeing all these different conflicts and seeing his internal struggle through all of those throughout the entire game, and seeing that like he does not kill indiscriminately. He kills, when he tracks down these people who are in charge of the order and everything like that. He is and that's where I think is the distinction I think a little bit between Cassandra and Bayek, like where their two characters are different, where because of there is player choice, you can just take these jobs in Odyssey that are like, this dude wronged me. You mind offing him really quick, and I'll give you some drachmi, kind of thing. And whereas Bayek, I wouldn't do that. Like you have that very clear thing. He kills who need to be in these areas, and like to either exact the vengeance on his son, to help people, like because you also do a lot of like you'll clear out bandit camps and stuff like that because those people, that's who he is sworn to protect, the people of Egypt as a Medjay. And so getting all these different fronts where he is constantly throughout the game balancing what is right and what aligns with his sense of duty and what he feels like is best for his country and the people he is sworn to protect, I think just created such a dynamic character and was and also incredibly well done. And so that I think for all of those reasons, I think is eventually, and like at the end of the game, like it all comes to a head. Like I believe he and Aya even separate at the end of it because while they both learn that they were even being played, because it does come out later in the game that even Cleopatra is under the influence of the order as well. It's like they see that their goals were ultimately aligned, but then they didn't work together at the best. But then they ultimately do realize like, hey, for us to really do this how we need to face both this threat of the order and continue to protect Egypt, like we can't be together all the time anymore. And so like they even like separate and go into different areas to take it all, to be able to do their best work. And so I just think the greater good, exactly. And so it just was really well done. I feel like the moral complexities that Bayek often found himself in for games. While I love the Assassin's Creed series, sometimes I do feel like it's cut and dry. Sometimes the characters' motivations of, there's this bad Templar order, we got to go get rid of those people. But I feel like they gave, and which is the same with Ezio. Like Ezio's family in Assassin's Creed 2, they were all executed by the Templar order, and so they both kind of share the same drive or origin in a way. Assassin's Creed origin. And so, but still, I just love that those it seems like Bayek was way more fleshed out of a character that Assassin's Creed had seen for a while. And so I feel like it was just a very well done, complete package, both in how his character and his drive married so well into the story of Assassin's Creed Origins. And it was just a absolute treat of a time getting to play as Bayek. So that's why he's my number 2.
So I really, I'm trying to think.
So now you're
like,
thinking,
what
you're trying to think who my number one is, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm trying to guess what your number one is because I'm like, I don't know who I think it's gonna be. Is it gonna be Ori from Ori and the Blind Forest?
I thought about
Character
Ori,
with
but it's not.
almost no personality.
I thought about maybe trying to pull somebody from Ori, but I was just like, nah, there's just not.
I
While I
kinda
love the
consider-
story of Ori and the Blind Forest and stuff like that, it just wasn't, it's just not enough there to like, pull me where I feel like, oh no, Ori's the best character of all time. So yeah.
I was also like, is there any way that I can shoehorn in a character from Hollow Knight because I desperately want to?
Once the Nintendo Switch is on its way out, we'll circle back around and you can do it then.
Yeah. So if anybody doesn't know, that's what we're not talking about, like games that are specifically for the Switch right now, because the Switch predates the PS5 and the Xbox Series, whatever, bejesus. So they're just a little not aligned, but eventually we'll probably go back and do something similar for the Switch. But for now, I want to talk about kind of an older game at this point, but that I still think about on the regular. And again, this is a game that I kind of wanted to put in the last episode, but it just didn't quite make the cut. But this character is one of the biggest reasons that I love this game so much, and it is Delilah from Firewatch.
Nice.
To see Firewatch make a comeback at some point.
Yep.
And again, this is technically a game that falls into the, air quotes, walking simulator category, which I still think is not entirely correct. I think it's more like a mosey adventure game. I think that's a little bit more accurate. But so the setup for Firewatch, for anybody that is unfamiliar, this game came out, 4 years ago? I want to say 4 years ago.
I'm honestly not sure. I think so.
Because we talked about it on the show when it was still a fairly new game.
Mm-hmm.
It was either 4 or 5 years ago. But so I played it on PS4. And the game features you playing as main character Henry. So Henry has a couple of choices that he can make about his given backstory, but the backstory is still very much there. So Henry's setup is that he is a middle-aged man, and the game takes place in 1989, for anybody that's wondering. So it doesn't really matter. It just sets the scene a little bit more. So Henry's deal is that he married someone that was the love of his life. They are just absolute soulmates. So couldn't be more in love, blah, blah, blah. But unfortunately, his wife develops early onset dementia. And it is just heartbreaking to kind of read through the story at the beginning of the game as you're more or less setting up your character of Henry. So you gather that Henry is off in the middle of nowhere I can't recall if the game is actually set in Montana or just like a state park. I'm not sure what the state is, but they're in a state park that looks like it could be, Montana, Idaho, maybe even Yosemite. I'm not really sure where they're at, but you get that kind of vibe. So Henry is basically going to be a Firewatch. He's going to go out to this state park and he's going to have this temporary job of living in a Firewatch tower and basically just monitoring the park for any wildfires that pop up. So that is the job of both himself and all of the other Firewatches scattered around the state park. So he's in his own tower, and then when he gets on the job his first day, you meet Delilah, air quotes there if you're just listening to the audio. He meets Delilah because she is technically his supervisor, but you meet her through her voice, through your walkie-talkie. So she's on your radio. She's basically your lifeline at the other end of a radio, because here you are out in the middle of nowhere. This very much was, it being 1989, this was pre-the internet as a staple of society. That's the way to phrase it. So it was before the internet and before cell phones were, just staples of society. And even now it's really hard to get reception in a lot of state parks. I would know, thanks T-Mobile. So even then you still probably need some walkie-talkies. So Henry's basically out in this tower in the middle of the forest to more or less escape his life. He's obviously struggling ferociously with dealing with his wife's dementia, and he has more or less abandoned her. So his wife is currently being cared for by her own parents, and he's just kind of running away from his problems. So I'm not saying that Henry is a bad man or a bad person. If anything, I think that this gives such a humanist look at what people are truly like. Humans are very complex characters. And the same goes for Delilah. And I think that this is also partially because of my love of mystery. I love not knowing everything about a character. So as Henry, you really never come to truly know Delilah. And I think that that's a really valuable part of this game, because the crux of Firewatch is it's not the gameplay. You know, you're not necessarily playing Firewatch for the gameplay itself. You're playing it for the story.
Mhm.
And the characters that are in that story are what makes it shine. They're what makes it special. And Delilah being this mysterious, sultry voice at the other end of a line that you'd never see. You never physically meet Delilah. I think that that makes her so much more fascinating as a person. So the game starts up, and this is going to have a lot of spoilers for Firewatch. So again, tread at your own cost. Delilah greets you on your walkie-talkie, and she seems like very vivacious, very peppy, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess this is my state park supervisor. And then a few conversations later, you're talking to Delilah again, and it's the next day. And you come to learn that Delilah freely admits that when she greeted you on your walkie-talkie the previous day, she was actually drunk at the time. So it's like, oh no, you're my supervisor. We're out here supposed to be watching for fires, and you were drunk when you greeted me? So that's kind of the first piece of this humanist approach to what do people do when they're in the middle of nowhere with basically nothing to entertain themselves aside from, books and patrolling the park. So it kind of brings to light all of these questions of what kind of person would take this job?
Mhm.
Because you know that in Henry's case, he's doing it to escape his problems. So what's Delilah escaping? And it just, makes it seem like, ooh, why would she be out here? And why is she out here for so long?
Mhm.
Because as you come to know Delilah a little bit better and you become really friends with her through your walkie-talkie link, you learn that she's been in the Forest Service and she's held this job of Firewatch for 13 years.
Oh, wow.
So she's been out there for a hella long time. And it's just so interesting because based on your voice interactions with her, she seems like a fairly gregarious person.
Mhm.
She seems like if you were to meet her on the street, she would come across as a social butterfly because she seems to start conversations very easily. She's never really, at a loss for words. Of course, she can't be in the context of the game. She kind of can't be. She needs to be able to talk to you at all times, but
Right.
she just has such an interesting character of almost being flirtatious. Some of the things that she can say to Henry come across as a little flirtatious, which again adds more to her character because at some point she does learn that Henry technically has a wife, even though they are by this point very estranged and they have a very complicated relationship. She knows about that, and it doesn't seem to impede, her conversations with Henry. That doesn't seem to really hold her back at all. And again, it's just great character building because this never really tarnishes her, at least in my opinion. It just builds on the complexity of human nature, and when you're out in the wilderness with so few other human connections, even if you know that somebody else already has a significant other, would that really stop you from trying to build a deep connection with that person
Yeah.
when no one else is around and there's no one there to judge you? Probably not.
Mhm.
And through the course of the game, you do learn that Delilah has a couple of other things in her past that are a little bit iffy. And it's like, ooh, should I really be this attached to you? Are you kind of the right person for me to be engaging with? And the game never really says a hard yes or no. It's always just portrayed as these are people. These are what people are like. This is what people talk about. This is how human relationships happen. And you're just kind of along for the ride. So in terms of writing, I think her character is incredibly well written. And a big part of why I'm so attached to Delilah is that her voice actress, Cissy Jones, does just an incredible job.
Mhm.
I think at the time that Firewatch came out, I would have to double check. I'm pretty sure that Cissy Jones at least got nominated
That sounds
for
very
a Best
familiar.
Actress award, or she may have won it. I can't quite recall if she won, but she definitely deserved to win if she didn't. So Cissy Jones does just an amazing job of portraying Delilah as this really complex woman. And especially in video games, I feel like women are frequently fairly one-dimensional, unfortunately. It's gotten so much better. Obviously, in modern times, it's much better now, but it's still kind of difficult to get characters in general. Like you mentioned with Bayek, a lot of the characters in Assassin's Creed kind of one-dimensional. Those motivations are a little flat sometimes. So even in the case of just main characters in general, it can be really hard to properly flesh them out and give them really interesting characters and backstories.
Right.
And in the case of Firewatch, I feel like Delilah has just enough given to the player and just enough held back to give you a sense for who she is, but to still feel like, I don't know you. I think I know you, but I really don't. And I love that mystery, and I love that that's how relationships are in most cases of life. Do I know you, Jerrett?
I don't know.
Do I truly?
We haven't spent a lot of time watching fires, so
yeah, we haven't.
Can we truly know the lengths of our relationship?
We'll never know until we're out in the forest together. So let's just give up our lives and our jobs and let's go live in God knows where and watch fires. So Delilah can be pushy, she can be fun, she can be engaging, she can be withholding, and I feel like she is just an incredible portrayal of a normal human person, which many video games do not achieve.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's on purpose, sometimes it's not. So as far as, just genuine character creation goes, I feel like Delilah is excellently put together. 10 out of 10. Would Delilah again.
Nice. Very cool. I was not I hadn't thought of, I was going through my mind trying to think of like what your possibilities could be for this, and Firewatch was not among them. So that's a pretty fun one.
I went wide. I went broad and wide for my selections. Also because I just talked about Tomb Raider, so I couldn't talk about Lara Croft again, even though I really wanted to.
Oh, man. All right. Well, then for my number one character, do you have any guesses what this could be?
I really don't.
Because I think at this point, it's probably obvious we don't line up with our anywhere.
I could guess a game series. Is it gonna be someone from Far Cry? That's kind of my go-to. Nope. Damn it. That cool nun from the Star Wars game that beats your ass.
Oh, Night Sister Marin? No.
Yeah.
Not her. I thought about her though. I actually didn't have anybody from a Star Wars game this generation in my list.
I'm assuming it's a game that I at least know that you've played.
Oh yeah.
Oh God. It's not Doom Guy. He has no personality.
No, zero personality. Other than just rage.
Other than rage, yeah, of course. Dang, is it a game we've both played?
No.
If it's Daniel, okay, thank God. I was going to say,
Life is Strange 2.
Sean and Daniel from Life is Strange 2.
No. It's not them.
Yeah, I give up. I don't think I know it.
My favorite character from this last generation is Abby Anderson from The Last of Us Part 2.
Abby Anderson.
The main.
I'm sorry. Just
you don't hear her usually with her last name.
No, so I was so confused because in my head, Life is Strange and Last of Us were just crossing wires.
Sam does that too.
And I was like,
when we talk
I
about
don't remember an Abby in Life is Strange too. And then it just sank in that you said The Last of Us.
Abby Anderson.
Interesting choice.
Last of Us Part 2.
Very nice. I can't believe I didn't even guess a Last of Us game. I suck.
Well, I mean, technically, this is the Last of Us Part 2 is the only one of the generation. So,
I
because
guess
the first game came out on PS3.
I forgot about that. My generations are very crossed at this point. Whoops.
Well, I mean, they keep doing the remasters and bringing stuff back. I mean, they brought Last of Us 1 and they remastered it for the PS4. So, I mean, that's understandable. But Abby was portrayed by Laura Bailey. And for me, I guess the common thread with all of these characters and what I like them so much is just they have to have a good arc, for me. And usually, and apparently with these three also, they have to go on a very emotional journey for me to really be like, I like this. Because Abby does that. And I think, and I know this is a very recent game, so I'm going to try to be fairly vague. I'm going to have to say some spoiler stuff, just heads up, everybody. But I think why I love Abby so much is that the contrast of how she's presented in the early game to how when you get to play as her in the mid-late game, how she's presented there, and you get to learn more about her motivations, more about her drives. I think it's just, again, how well, I think that lends to how well she was written in the game. But you hate her when you first see her. You absolutely hate her. And then by the end of the game, I loved her more than Ellie. And which the game is always told, like, you're seeing Ellie's journey. This is, the continuation of Ellie's story. So you're expecting, and I love Ellie too. Not saying I don't. Like, another very complex character. But Abby, I think, this is really hard to do without saying a lot of spoilers. So you're forewarned. Things might slip. But the very beginning of the game, you hate her. And then as you get to progress with her, and I think as they fleshed her out so well, because you learn her motivations, you learn why she did what she did. And it's not just the new run-of-the-mill enemy who we're going to encounter this game and you're going to defeat. They tied her so well back to the original game in a way that was not immediately apparent, but once it became clear, I was just like, oh man, that makes so much sense. And such a great pull to have this character now be the antagonist for part 2. But then could you later argue protagonist? Maybe not all that bad, kind of thing. The thing is, she does something terrible at the beginning of the game and makes a terrible decision in the sense that, okay, this is so hard trying to dance around. She murders Joel. Okay, everybody, like, it's just there. Like, I'm sorry. It's hard to say. It's hard to talk about her as a character without mentioning these specifics of the game. And that again ties back to the theme kind of Last of Us Part 2 is breaking these cycles of violence, and that how violence begets violence begets violence begets violence. If that's the continual response to violence. And so Joel in Part 1, you find out, murders her father, who is the surgeon who's going to operate on Ellie to eventually make the cure for this virus that's going throughout the world. Joel murders her because he was because he was looking out and trying to protect Ellie, which is like the last thing that he had in the world that he cared about. And so that then spurs Abby to dedicate her life to hunting down Joel. She does that in the beginning of this part 2, which then leads Ellie to chase her down, which causes her, Abby, to then lose all of her friends. So she takes that and she learns from it. Whereas, we talked about in our review of part 2, Ellie doesn't learn. She sees red, and that's all she sees. And she can't, and she just chugs forward. Abby recognizes through the events of the game that what she did was wrong, and that the only way to stop it from happening again and for somebody else to keep coming to hunt her down, or she has to be the one to say no eventually at one point. And that, and that does come to a head in the game. And it both in kind of like the mid part and then the finale. And I just think seeing that character growth, plus, again, going back to what I said of you hate her because of what she does to Joel, you then see her interactions with her group before, because, like the part 2, you see Ellie's story play through the events, and then you go back and replay through some of the events again as Abby. And so you really get this closer dive into her, where that's where it kind of is like, oh no, she's not like this hardened person set out with one goal to kill everyone that you know and love. She was seeking revenge on one specific person, and got that goal, and was fine being, and not necessarily saying her actions are justified, but still she got that revenge, and then she was fine to just be like, she even lets Ellie live if she and Joel's brother, because that's not who she was looking for. But then Ellie rolls into town and just starts wiping everybody out. And so she feels like there has to be a response to that as well. But you get so much more of her character in her interactions with, especially her ex-boyfriend Owen, and then just her other friend group. But then where I think her character really shines is when she meets Lev and Yara and takes them under her wing and under her protection. She could have left them to be killed by their own people, the Seraphites, or the Scars, as they're called. She could have left them to fend for themselves. But no, even though they are of this group that her group is fighting against constantly in Seattle, she takes them in. She brings them under her wing and protects them, even though she knows that that's going to put her neck out and possibly get her killed for her actions from her own group and its leader, Isaac. So presented with these tough moral decisions, she seems, with the exception of the very first one she makes, she seems to always be like, no, this is what's right. This is what I need to do. Again, a very strong moral compass inside her. And I think, especially in a world gone to shit as bad as it has in the Last of Us in the Last of Us world, like that's necessary to have those kinds of people and to like really help keep the world on the right track. And I just feel like her journey of being utterly consumed with this need for revenge, getting that revenge, having the consequences of that come onto her, but then also at the real time seeing through what needs to be done and what needs to be right to correct this situation and being brave enough to take those steps is very impactful and very powerful. And so I think having all that, and then again, I've said it, like how well written the game was and just how well that was tied into Ellie's journey and Ellie's story and contrasted to Ellie's story. Because again, like I said, like Ellie just sees red and that's all she sees through this game until like the very last possible second in the finale. And so just because that you just connect very well with Abby, you grow, in my case at least, go from absolutely despising to loving and hoping and praying that like she is not killed or something like that throughout the whole game, and that and that she is able to find a happy ending. I mean, you hope that for both of the characters, but still, as by the end of it, I was really hoping for it for her. I was just like, oh no, please don't introduce this wonderful character to us and then have her taken away at the end. Like, please, please, please. And so it was just how well you connected with her and root for her when you're expecting from the beginning of the game to absolutely despise her, I think sets her apart from all the characters that from this generation, and that's why she sits as my number one. I gotta give it to Abby. So
excellent choice, and I can't believe I didn't think of that. I think it's just because the game is still so new in my mind that I just wouldn't. It just didn't populate. Which did not compute.
Which I was kind of then balancing. Is she my number one because she is so recent? But I just think. I think still it's just she connected so strongly with me.
Yeah, and from what you've told me, I haven't played The Last of Us 2, sorry. But from what I've heard from you and from other people, it does sound like she's just got such a depth of character, that deep character building that I think would naturally set her apart from many other characters.
Oh, yeah.
And I do like that in the context of a game like The Last of Us where, you've got murder machines Joel and Ellie who just, sure, it's part of the gameplay, but they are just indiscriminate mass murderers in a lot of senses.
Yeah.
I feel like it's really interesting to finally have a character that's like, maybe the murdering is the bad thing to do.
Are we the baddies? Yeah.
Are we? Am I the bad guy? Am I the asshole, Reddit?
Exactly.
Can you imagine a Reddit post from Abby, am I the asshole?
All
so I killed this girl's pseudo-father. Am I the asshole?
Everybody sucks here ruling, probably.
Probably would be. It would be you are all terrible, and one of you has to be the bigger person here, and at least Abby is that bigger person.
Exactly.
I like her by proxy because of you.
Yep. So that's why she sits as my number one. Who are you going to top? Who's your number one pick?
I can definitely guess it.
I'll give you
one guess.
Oh, okay. Chloe Price, Life is Strange.
So close.
Damn it.
It's actually Max.
Oh, really?
I picked Max. Yes. So you were definitely on the right track. See, I thought you were going to pick Chloe.
She's in my honorable mentions.
Yeah. I was like, I feel like he's definitely going to pick Chloe. And even though I do like Chloe, I always adored Max. So Max Caulfield from Life is Strange. And you could technically argue that it may or may not count because Life is Strange did actually come out for the PS3 and for Xbox 360, but it came out in 2015. So the PS4 was already out, so it was really current. Just that they made it backwards compatible.
Yeah.
So Life is Strange first started coming out in 2015. Of course, at the time it was the episodic releases. Thank God I missed that. Got the game in one go once it was officially all out. And I'll never do it differently ever again, as we've talked about. But Life is Strange is one of the most interesting games I've ever played, period. And I love every single character in it. Oh, except for your lame guy friend. What's his name?
Oh,
Luke or something?
Warren?
Warren, yes, normal high school boy Warren. He's the only one that I'm kind of like iffy on. Other than that, Max, Chloe, Jefferson, Nathan, that that really shitty kid in your school,
Yep.
Victoria, really all of the characters in that game, I thought were really well designed. And this kind of usurps what I said before about the outsider and why I didn't pick Corvo or Emily. What is her last name?
Caldwin?
Caldwin. Yes, I'm getting Caulfield and Caldwin very confused.
Oh,
So
yeah, they
I
are very
didn't
similar. I
pick
didn't
either of
connect
them.
that.
Yeah. I didn't pick either of them. I said because you do have so much character choice with them, technically the same is true of Max. So obviously Life is Strange is a game that is entirely about making decisions. That's the whole point. So it's about making decisions, and then once you've made that choice, do you choose to undo it? Do you choose to go back in time and do something differently, or do you stick to your guns and go forward with the decisions that you've made? So in that sense, I'm not really including Max in that same category of the protagonist who is shaped by your decisions, because I don't feel that that's true.
Yeah.
I feel that you are playing as Max whose decisions shape the world, not Max as the person. And I feel like that's an important distinction because as you're shaping the world around you, you get to see so much more of Max's character growth and kind of who she's in the process of becoming. Because unlike many of the other characters we've talked about, Max is young. She's a modern day teenager. So she's 18 at the time of the game taking place, and she's in her senior year of high school. So she's an aspiring photographer who goes to this fancy dancy art school. So her and all of her friends are like these, we're artists you wouldn't understand. And it's very much the environment that they live in.
A lot of angst. Yeah.
A lot of angst. But in Max's case, that angst is a little bit less than you get the feeling most of the other people she interacts with are. In the case of Chloe, she comes from a broken home. She's lost a parent in the past. Her character development is just fraught with dealing with step parents, dealing with loss. So she's a very broken character kind of when you first meet her. Whereas Max seems to be much more put together. She and Chloe were very good friends with it when they were young, and then Max and her family moved away, and that clearly created a lot of emotional rift in both of them. But Max seems to have weathered that storm much better than Chloe did. And I'm sure that that has to do with the fact that Max's parents are still together. They are both still alive. She clearly comes from just a more stable home background in general. You even get texts and stuff from your parents throughout the game, and you get the feeling that they have a good relationship. So as far as, it's kind of a case of rich kid, poor kid, because Chloe is in this fancy art school, I think on a scholarship, and I'm pretty sure she's in danger of losing it if she doesn't get her act together. Whereas Max, I don't think that's the case. I think she's there because she probably comes from a somewhat more privileged background.
Or is Chloe even in the school?
She dropped out. She dropped out. Yes, you're right. Okay. She dropped out. I just thought of that because she's physically present in the school when you start the game. But yeah, you're right. She dropped out. So, Chloe's even a high school dropout. So they just have this gigantic rift between them in terms of where they're each at in life. And that kind of makes it seem like, oh, Chloe's this bad girl. She's, on the wrong side of the tracks. And it makes it seem in comparison like Max is this very, shiny Oxford shoes, perfect little girl, has like the perfect life. And that's kind of not true in a lot of ways. Not that she doesn't have a very good life, but I feel like it's so interesting to see her character development because she gets this insane power out of nowhere to manipulate time.
Yeah.
And you don't know why. It's never explained where it comes from. Life just do be strange sometimes.
It really does.
Sometimes it really do. So she's just got this mysterious power to reverse time, and it brings up all of these questions of, what if you were just a normal high school kid that got the power to hecking reverse time? What would that do to you? And I feel like it's so interesting to see Max kind of come into this incredible power, this world-breaking power as a teenager, what do you do? How do you deal with that? How do you use it?
Mm-hmm.
And this really, Max's character development is so interesting to me because she goes from being pretty shy. She comes across as kind of shyer, more introverted, definitely not super assertive. She's not very assertive. She's not very aggressive. But through the course of the game, she slowly gains more of those traits to the extent where she's actively trying to use her power to defy reality, to defy what the world wants, which is, big spoiler for Life is Strange, the world wants to kill Chloe.
Yeah.
It wants her dead. That is how the course of events is supposed to take place. And because Max broke that, because Max intentionally broke that chain of events, the world is spiraling into chaos. And you're having to deal with the consequences of your own actions as Max. And you either have to emotionally come to terms with those and accept the things you've done, or you have to completely undo them. You have to completely undo everything that you've done over the course of these events and deal with the emotional fallout of that.
Mm-hmm.
If you let Chloe die, what does that do to you as a person? If you let her live, what does the blood of the entire rest of your town on your hands, what does that do to you?
Yeah.
So I feel like her character development is just fascinating because you would never look at Max and go, I bet that if she were kidnapped by a psychopathic murderer, I bet that she would just die. And it's like, no, not
Nope.
Max Caulfield. She's gonna live. She's not that character in the horror game. She's gonna get her shit together, spit in the face of her kidnapper, and she will make it out of there alive. I just loved her character development. I loved seeing her become kind of a badass.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, in the beginning, she's very much not. She's kind of this shying, retiring wallflower. And at the end of the game, she's like, I'm gonna make the world do what I want it to. And it's like, hell yeah, Max, you get yours. Who cares if the world falls apart at the seams because of it? I just really like her character arc. I think that it is so well done. And I don't feel like the choices you make in the game negatively affect or detract from her character. And that's why I feel like it's just clear evidence to me that she is incredibly well written.
Mm-hmm.
As a playable protagonist, I feel like that's really hard to do, especially in a game with so much choice. And in Max's case, it really just added. It just every decision and going back and seeing where the other decisions took me, all of that just added to my appreciation of her as a character and of the game, of course, of the broader game in general. So I think Max Caulfield is A++ tier, perhaps even S+.
Oh,
she might be an S+ character for she is number one on my list. So
I'd say that's pretty S tier.
Yes, pretty S tier. So Max Caulfield, I think she's very excellent, and she's really the key reason that I love that game so much.
Nice.
Heart emoji for her.
Big time hearts emojis for her.
Big time
so
hearts.
Your top 3 characters then were
the Outsider from the Dishonored series. Middle one that I've instantly forgotten, Delilah from Firewatch. And Max Caulfield from Life is Strange.
Very nice. And for me, my picks were Dutch Vanderlyn from Red Dead Redemption 2, Bayek of Siwa from Assassin's Creed Origins, and Abby Anderson from The Last of Us Part 2. But so real quick though, before we go, let's do this, kind of run through these pretty quickly. But what were some of your honorable mentions, if you had any?
All of my honorable mentions were characters that, again, come from games with a lot of choice. I actually wanted to try and put in one of the pigeons from Hatoful Boyfriend. Just because I have been thinking about that game so much lately. Once I realized that the developers of Hatoful Boyfriend made Fall Guys, it has just made me constantly think about Hatoful Boyfriend. But I decided not to go that route. Similarly, I was thinking of potentially doing a character from Dream Daddy, because I feel like all of those characters are really interesting and fleshed out too. But I didn't choose any of them. If I had picked one from Dream Daddy, it probably would have been Robert, because he's that mysterious bad boy. He's kind of an asshole, and you're like, what is this guy's deal? So I probably would have picked Robert, but I didn't.
Nice. Didn't we give him like the Batman voice when we were doing
Yeah,
our
we
playthrough
did.
of Dream Daddy?
You talk like Batman.
So my choices, though, my honorable mentions, I'll just run through these real quick, were Senua from Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice.
Ooh, I wondered if you were going to do that one. I
She
thought
was-
about it too.
She was
Yeah.
close. She was almost there. Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2, Chloe Price, Life is Strange, Mimir from God of War, Kratos from God of War, and Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn.
My other runner-up, I almost forgot about her. I actually wanted to do Jessie from Control.
Oh, yeah,
She
yeah,
was
yeah.
pretty interesting.
Jesse was pretty
As-
awesome.
I actually really wanted to do Langston from Control, but I couldn't justify it. I just love him.
He has a very small role, but yeah, he was a great character.
He's
He was
just
great.
fun. But Jessie is a really interesting and complex character, and I think she definitely would have been a good runner-up. I just don't feel like I have that strong emotional attachment to
Right,
her
and that's-
that I do to some of the other characters.
Eventually, that's what really it came down to for me, was was finding the characters that I did have a very strong emotional tie with.
Yeah.
Because especially in my choices, all three of them had very emotional journeys. But like it's when I think of Red Dead Redemption 2, what do I think about a lot? I think of Dutch van der Linde. When I think of
Yeah.
Origins, I think of Bayek. And then Last is Part 2. Yeah, I was just like Abby is what sticks out to me from all those games.
Absolutely.
So, well, that concludes our run through of our favorite characters from the PS4 and Xbox One console generations. Can you let us know what some of your favorites were as well? So write us an email at teamchatpodcast@gmail.com. Message us on any of our social media or Discord. We'd love to hear from you all. But that pretty much wraps up this episode of Team Chat Podcast. Until next time, everyone, I'm one of your hosts, Jerrett Wilson, joined by Rachel Mogan.
Adios.
We'll see you all next week.